Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat disinfected.
Hey, Kiernan.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Good. I love our morning shows.
I'm not, it's not my way. You do seem, are you a morning person?
A pandemic morning person, yeah.
I see, yeah. Because you haven't gone out until like 2 a.m. the night before.
No, there's a citywide shutdown at 10 o'clock. I can't get in that much trouble,
I don't know. From the gray in your beard that I'm seeing, it does not look like you should be staying out that late, even post-pandemic.
I'm thinking about getting the beard colored, maybe like a purple, something
I don't know. You're a pretty sweaty dude. And if we've learned anything from Rudy Giuliani, it's that sweaty hair dye. It's not a good combo.
I would probably, splurge for the proper, the stuff that works.
Now, Ryan, you've discovered an interesting fact about the pod, and this episode is one that's going to fall into one of these buckets, which is the destination episodes, where we do a guide to a city or a region or a country, tend to be what folks like to listen to the most.
Yeah, so our top 10 downloaded episodes are all city guides, or all place guides.
It's almost like people don't want to hear our personal opinions and personality. They just want us to regurgitate guides to cities.
Do you remember that one bad we have like one bad review on iTunes?
Yeah.
And it's a woman who says that we have too many opinions about travel.
It's very fun. It's so funny you say that, because I was just recently looking at the reviews, which, by the way, long time since we've asked listeners to go give us 5 stars, write a good review. If you enjoy the podcast, it's very helpful to help people discover it, and we'd really appreciate it. We don't ask you for any money. We don't have a Patreon.
No.
Someday.
Someday.
And Ryan, this is today we are doing yet another destination, and it's you're just so on a southern kick right now.
Well, this is not just me, Kiernan. This is you. Both of us have been to the city. People know what the city is because they've clicked on the episode.
Yeah, there's a title. We're not teasing it.
No, we're going to Charleston today.
Yeah, right. Going to Charleston, and now my understanding is you've gone. Did you go during the pandemic?
Yeah, so this was one of the cities in my my sort of
Southern
road
tour.
trip, road trip tour. Yeah. So we were in Charleston for 10 days, and I have to say I loved it. I had a great time, so I'm excited to sort of unpack Charleston today with you.
Absolutely, and because of these destination episodes, we don't want to put too much of our personalities up front here.
No,
otherwise people may delete. So I would suggest we get right to takeoff and we start exploring the city of Charleston, South Carolina.
I think that makes sense. Flight attendants? Cabin crew?
Cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
It's a short flight to Charleston.
Oh, God. So Ryan, first let's start with what made you choose Charleston. We all know you spent 9 months in Tennessee, and you've insisted on making the podcast mostly a Tennessee-based podcast. So now that we're diverting into South Carolina, what brought you to Charleston? Had you been before?
Yes, I had been to Charleston before in the last few years, but just for a couple nights. And I hadn't had a chance to really explore. So I felt like with the weather being warm still in Charleston, when I was there a couple months ago, it would make sense to go there because, there's a lot of outdoor dining and gardens and, things that are not indoor and pandemic-y. So that's how sort of Charleston made the list. But look, Charleston is a major travel destination. In 2016, Travel and Leisure magazine said Charleston was the best city in the world. So this episode is up there with, like, if we were doing one just called like London or Barcelona,
I feel so, Charleston, perfectly charming. I do think, to your point about it being a pandemic friendly tourist destination, it is an extremely walkable city, and it's lovely. I mean, it's some of the most beautiful streets, and it's I would describe it as very curated. Like, they have very high standards for upkeep of these old historic homes. As you say, there's beautiful gardens and window boxes, and everything is just kept up.
Yeah, especially in the sort of in the neighborhoods that tourists are, it is beautiful, and a lot of sun, and you're surrounded by, it's a port city, right? So you're surrounded by water pretty much every direction that you go.
Yeah.
In Charleston, there is water there. So It just feels very open air. It's a good place, a good place to go during a pandemic. Yeah.
They also, the spirit of the city is by its nature welcoming. So one of the quintessential associations, the symbols of the city, is a pineapple, which is supposed to be a welcoming symbol. And there's in fact a famous fountain that is just a giant pineapple that kind of welcomes you to the city.
Yes, pineapples are sort of around the city, and that, it's a lovely little fountain.
Absolutely, I didn't actually have any pineapple while I was there, though.
I don't think I did either. No.
Can I tell you an interesting pineapple fact?
Please do.
Okay, so did you did a road trip there, right? You drove.
Yes.
So you were able to go out to some of the areas that were not the direct area of the city. You could escape the water.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. In fact, we stayed in sort of a part of Charleston that is not directly by the water. So, yes.
And when you're driving around, you have a lot of big old growth trees.
Oh, my God. There's so many beautiful trees everywhere.
And what's strongly associated with Charleston is the Spanish moss that hangs down from these trees, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And what's so interesting, at least I find it interesting, is the first Spanish moss, not actually a moss. It's a bromeliad. And what's that mean? Well, it's part of the pineapple family. It doesn't look anything like a pineapple, but it's got a funny history, which is Native Americans used to call it tree hair. That was sort of the English translation of what Native Americans called it. And Charleston, of course, was one of these areas where French explorers and Spanish colonists, they were all starting to meet in some of these southern states. And French explorers called it Spanish beard, to try to be derogatory towards the Spanish. Right. And then the Spanish started calling it French beard. So,
French beard didn't catch on, though.
No, it did. No. It kind of all went out in the wash. But either way, it is very charming. I really like it. And it's got kind of a cool Gothic vibe to the city. It's that Southern Gothic feel.
Oh, definitely. It is really up there with Savannah. It is like the Southern Gothic, city that I've ever been to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as we said, it is a port city, so you are always near the water. And it does sort of have a place in U.S. history as where the very first shot of the Civil War was fired, right there in Fort Sumter, which you can see, when you're in downtown Charleston on the Battery. So there's a couple kind of key neighborhoods that folks should be aware of. And there's the French Quarter and the Battery districts. And those are where all these beautiful houses are. These incredibly, these antebellum mansions, right? That have all been meticulously upkept. Beautiful houses. And there's a promenade there called the Battery Promenade that is sort of on Port Charleston. You can walk down, see a lot of parks, great views of the houses from there. And it's actually from there you can look out and see Fort Sumter, which is where obviously the first shots of the Civil War were. So, city that's, we've talked a lot about, we've been in a lot of Civil War related cities in the last couple months on the podcast, and Charleston is definitely sort of continuing that tradition here.
And Ryan, the history of Fort Sumter, the kind of story behind it is it's not just where the first shot was fired. Do you know it was actually also the site of the first death? But what's interesting, it was the day after the first shot. So, what basically happened was this was a fort, a sea fort that Lincoln had decided to keep. And this is where the Southerners decided to dig in and not abandon it to the Union troops. And they sent the signal shell. And that's where actual warfare commenced.
And Lincoln's strategy was to make the South fire the first shot against Fort Sumter.
Yep, there's a visitor center, and there's a ferry that takes, I think it's like an hour to 90-minute round trip to go out and at least see the fort closer up. But it's close enough to the Battery that you really do get a good sense of it from there.
Yeah, totally. And you can imagine being like a Charleston resident, like looking out at the beginning of the Civil War with a lot of trepidation. What is going to happen? And we're going to talk a bit about the Battery, but all those houses, those were, folks who owned houses in Charleston at that time. They had participated in this real Charleston social scene. So this was like a city of fancy folks who all sort of came down to Charleston for the social scene. They had, they had plantations, they had houses sort of outside of Charleston, but they were there to have a good time, and I don't think the war was really what they were looking for.
Yeah, and you're also alluding to something that we will also speak about, which is the history of slavery associated with Charleston. As you say, there are plantations just outside the city, some of which are still tourist sites today. I believe you walked the grounds of one of them.
Yeah, we're talking about Magnolia today. I mean, there are quite a few plantations around Charleston that are available for tours. The one that we're going to talk about, I think the one that we both went to is Magnolia, which is a pretty epic space. It's really something.
And the city works to acknowledge the history of slavery. We're also going to talk about a museum called the Old Slave Mart Museum that I visited. So it's a complicated and dark history in many ways, and for the history of the Civil War and where the wealth that built Charleston came from.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, one of the houses that I toured that we're talking about today, was actually owned by somebody in the slave trade. So when you're walking through this beautiful mansion, and so when you're touring this mansion, you constantly in the back of your mind is that this is from the slave trade. He made this selling people.
Exactly right. So let's dig into the Battery and give a sense of what it's like to tour those streets.
So one of the more famous sort of collections of houses in Charleston is Rainbow Row. Did you get a chance to see that when you were there?
Yes.
And yeah, it's really cool. It's like a series of, I think it's 13 houses sort of in a row that represent sort of the largest cluster of these types of Georgian row houses in the U.S. And they're each painted a different color to give you that sort of pastel rainbow. And it's, I have to say, it's pretty Instagram friendly.
Yeah, the Charleston Preservation Society is definitely a big voice in the city, and there are certain expectations that are set for keeping up your homes. I will say, I know you absolutely loved it, Ryan. There were times, and Rainbow Row is one of those for me, where it can feel a little artificial or Disney-fied because it is so kept up. Oh, Ryan's rolling his eyes. I'm wrong.
No, I know. I do. I mean, it is. It's like when you're in downtown Prague, you're like, oh, this is Disney-fied. I mean, that's totally fair to say.
That's not exactly the same.
No, it is
destroyed.
Yeah, no, but I mean, look. I feel like if you're a person who buys a house in Charleston, one of these houses in one of these neighborhoods that we're talking about, you do it because you want to make sure that your house is sort of kept up in this historic fashion. I mean, when you're walking around Charleston, pretty much every other house has a plaque, and it tells you everything about the person who lived there. And the vibe is steeped in the history of Charleston in a way that a lot of other cities. I actually feel like New York really drops the ball on this. There's history all around New York, and yet I walk around Bushwick in my neighborhood here, or East Williamsburg. There are zero signs that tell me anything about the history of the neighborhood. I have to kind of go looking for it. Charleston, you don't have to go looking for it. It is everywhere. You can read about every minor person who ever owned a nice house in Charleston. So one thing to note, though, is the houses weren't always this beautiful and upkept. In fact, after the Civil War, downtown Charleston was really, after the Civil War, downtown Charleston was really messed up. The houses were in disrepair, and things were really devolving. And it wasn't until the 1920s when this woman named Susan Frost founded something called the Society for the Preservation of Old Dwellings that actually began to restore some of these houses to their former glory. And she's given a lot of credit for sort of coming up with Rainbow Row, which sparked sort of the idea to kind of make this area beautiful again. And then by 1945, most of those houses had been restored. So what we see in Charleston now is the result of a lot of work of locals who said, let's bring these houses back and let's make them beautiful.
And it's very much the postcard of Charleston. I mean, this is when you think of Charleston, when people travel to Charleston, it is to walk and see these roads.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, you're giving a good thought of you should look for those plaques. And if you're very interested in architecture, there's a lot of architectural variety among the houses and a lot of information available. But I would also encourage folks who are walking around to keep their eye out for something called an earthquake bolt. And what this is, Charleston is right on the shore. It's ravaged by hurricanes, the salt air, and there was a famous earthquake in 1886 that damaged or at least threatened many of these homes. And so what they did to keep the home standing was they put an iron rod straight from one wall to the other wall to keep these houses bound together. And on the outside of the houses, you can see the cap to these iron rods. They're called gib plates. And usually there's 3 or 4 across the different floors. And you can see what these iron rods keeping these houses standing despite a very difficult environment.
I don't think that I noticed any of those. That would have been something to know before my trip, Kiernan.
Well, you really should have listened to this podcast.
That's true. So there are a few of these classic houses that are open to tour. The Historical Charleston Foundation has a great list, and we'll link on the website. I toured the Nathan Russell House, and this is one of this is from 1808. This house owned by, like I said, it was owned by a slave trader, and then handed down to several people in his family. But it is an opportunity to sort of see how Charleston society lived, sort of in the build up to the Civil War. And you can actually see, you can stand on the porch and you can look out and see Fort Sumter. And our guide told us that throughout the Civil War, many luminaries from the Confederate Army actually stayed in that house and would actually watch what was happening, stand on that porch and watch what was happening at Fort Sumter. So, the house is from 1808. The guy who lived there, Nathan Russell, not that interesting of a guy. He was a slave trader. He made a lot of money, doing that. Didn't seem to have a lot of interest outside of having a beautiful house and the Charleston social scene. But it is really fascinating to sort of be able to stand on that porch and just imagine what it was like in that summer the war started. When folks are just there for the Charleston social scene, and all of a sudden, their world comes crashing down around them. So, well,
and it's important to underline here, Charleston was the main importation point for the slave trade, for the transatlantic slave trade. So this is where the wealth came in. It was the basis of the founding of the city, and it had a great symbolic purpose in the Civil War because of that.
Exactly. And you're going to talk a bit about a museum that really unpacks that history.
Well, and Ryan, also, we should mention Charleston, often the nickname is, of course, the Holy City. And that's because there are also lots of beautiful historic churches around town. And I think you can enjoy most of those from an outdoor, because the weather tends to be so lovely there. I think just wandering in the Battery and enjoying these old houses, reading the plaques, to me, that's the best way to enjoy this central part of Charleston.
Absolutely. This is a walking day. If you tour one of the mansions, it'll take 45 minutes. But I think walking the Battery, walking around the city, looking at Rainbow Row, it's a really great way to sort of see all the beauty that Charleston has to offer down there.
At one point during slavery, as many as 35 to 40% of slaves entering the United States came in through Charleston. And originally, there were sales out in the open, these horrific marketplaces for slaves. In 1808, the United States banned the importation of slaves, but that doesn't mean that there weren't still sales of slaves. And in fact, there was a booming business, disgusting business, in the auctioning of slaves. And in Charleston, this was done in the open air. But when European visitors came, they would criticize the city. They were horrified at this institution. And what Charleston did was they decided to move the slavery auctions indoors so that visitors wouldn't necessarily know what was going on. And the Old Slave Art Museum actually preserves the last remaining structure that served as one of these indoor old slave marts. And I use mart because that's the term that it actually was called. And it's interesting that It's interesting to say that the museum actually aspires to be staffed by individuals that can trace their history to Charleston slaves. So the history is very much alive there. And by the way, I would really argue if you're going to Charleston and you are going to take in the beauty and the culture and the food, I think it's very important to make time to visit the Old Slave Mart Museum because it teaches you and preserves a lot of the anecdotal evidence and really deep dives into the history of slavery. And it openly says it is not a museum for children because there's very few objects. It's much more about the preservation of information. And I know one of the things that most struck me inside the museum, and I ended up purchasing a book in the gift shop that preserved even more of these, was the preservation of an interview with a former slave. And something that it taught me that I didn't know about was what's called the slave narratives. So, Ryan, you're familiar with the WPA?
Of course. Yeah.
So one of the projects that it undertook was to hold interview with former slaves to try to preserve the memories of these last few who lived under this disgusting institution. And they really put a spotlight on this in the Old Slave Mart Museum. And in the gift shop, I bought a collection of these interviews and came home, and it really made it helped me to deep dive. And of course, many of these are also available for free online. So we will link to those in the show notes as well. But the Old Slave Mart Museum does a great job of keeping this important story and the basis of Charleston's wealth alive.
And to Charleston's credit, anytime you're in a southern city and you're standing in Market Square, odds are that Market Square was used at some point for the slave trade, and not all cities really delve into it or acknowledge it. So I think it's Charleston is like many. I don't think they're there yet. And when we toured the Nathan Russell House, it was clear that the guides didn't really want to unpack any of that history. Right? They were much more about the beauty of the house. So definitely important for folks to visit this museum to get the real understanding of Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
So Charleston is a food city. It is given a lot of credit for the development of new Southern cooking, which we'll talk about, one of the famous restaurants there. So this is not in any way, shape, or form meant to be an exhaustive list of Charleston restaurants.
Yeah.
It's just a handful that you and I both sort of got a chance to visit. And there's, there's a great culture of outdoor dining that already exists in Charleston because of the weather and all the porches and stuff. So there's a lot of outdoor and porch dining that was accessible to us when we were there. And while a lot of these restaurants we're going to talk about are in the downtown area, the French Quarter and the Battery and around those areas, I think it's a good opportunity to use restaurants as a way to sort of explore some of the other areas in Charleston. So I'm going to flag a few restaurants here that are not downtown that you have to get in your car and sort of drive to. So because it's definitely worth exploring sort of greater Charleston area because, it is a really beautiful, interesting city. So in the spirit of that, I want to start with one of the first restaurants I went to when I was in Charleston. We had gotten in and we wanted to have a couple glasses of wine and sort of enjoy the nice night. And found this restaurant called Stems and Skins. And this is a wine bar restaurant. Which
What a surprise.
What a surprise. That's based in North Charleston. And North Charleston is a good 15, 20 minute drive from downtown. So, and the whole way that we're driving, we feel like we are leaving the city. Like, it is pretty empty. We're going by a lot of warehouses and a lot of like old factories and things. And we arrive in this sort of what looks to be like another little downtown, this avenue called Montague Avenue, which is basically this street that used to that was bustling and then went and then like many parts of the town had a period where it was sort of had a period where it was really not a place that you would visit. And in the last 20, 30 years has just become a little second kind of downtown for Charleston. So there's a lot of coffee shops there. There's some theater companies. There's, it is a whole other little part of Charleston to walk around and explore. So I would recommend go grab a couple glasses of natural wine, this lovely place. have some tapas and sort of walk around in the evening there and look at all these other really cool places that have sort of popped up around Montague, which is sort of a hipster neighborhood, if you will, in Charleston.
Well, and you're also making a good point. So you drove that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're also making a good point that I would underline, even just outside of the food scene, is that you really open up possibilities of exploring Charleston by having a car.
You need a car. Yeah.
Well, if you're there for a 3-day weekend,
No.
you could definitely stay in just the Battery area. But if you're doing anything longer than that, you definitely need a car.
Yeah, because some of the gardens and things are outside of the downtown city.
Yep.
So that's a cool place to explore. A lot of murals and things sort of around that in that North Charleston area around Montague Avenue where Stems and Skins is. Another cool place to explore is Sullivan's Island. So Sullivan's Island is this, kind of affluent, rich suburb in outside of Charleston that is like Foley Beach. Another sort of, it's an island. It is sort of isolated from the main part of the city. That you can go swimming there, and there's a lot of beach related things to do.
Well, I think that that is actually a major point to underline as well, which is what many people don't understand is there are a bevy of islands just outside Charleston, and you can plan a trip outside of the central area of Charleston and have a really beach and outdoor focused vacation. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Totally. So we went to this restaurant in Sullivan's Island called the Obstinate Daughter. Which was, had really fresh seafood and farm to table and was delicious and bustling. And let me tell you, that is an operation. But it's a beautiful place. A great outdoor area. And because you're on an island, I mean, you just feel like you're basically sitting on the beach, but it's not tacky or anything like that. It's actually a lovely, restaurant. I would love to have eaten inside because you could tell that it was beautiful, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. But after we ate, it was we took a lovely walk on the moonlit walk on the beach, and there was nobody around because this is I think about 1,000 people live on Sullivan's Island, so it's a very small community. Mm-hmm. And it was great just to explore after a meal. So there was a lot of things to do like that in Charleston, and just sort of enjoy the kind of beauty of your surroundings in an unplanned way, and get use a meal as a way to sort of begin that. And the folks at Obstinate Daughter describe their restaurant as country chic, which I think is a good way to think about Charleston.
Yeah, I was just about to say that really encompasses a lot of the feel of the city.
Totally. And from the Obstinate Daughter, like I said, you can walk right to the beach. There's an old lighthouse that you can get to. There's a couple trails. So you could have an early dinner and then spend a couple hours just sort of walking around the island and seeing sort of all this sort of strange things there.
Ryan, what are these strange things that you're referring to?
Well, on the beach, there's quite a few different old batteries that are sort of closed, but we were able to sort of sneak in and walk around. Obviously, Charleston, a port city, in the Civil War. So there's just a lot of sort of old decommissioned, war things left over from the war. So you can kind of walk around these batteries because they haven't really been renovated and nobody's really done anything to make them beautiful, but you can kind of see where folks where when Charleston was really a war city, there's a lot of remnants of that around. So that's called the Battery Thompson, which is within a 5-minute walk from the Obstinate Daughter. There's another one called the Battery Gadsden. So all that is sort of near the beach. So I would just encourage folks to just to walk around Sullivan's Island and you can see these different batteries. You can see the lighthouse. It's just it sort of feels like you've left the city behind. There's no bustle there.
So, Ryan, do you want to talk about a little bit more of the kind of upscale, the New South cuisine, as it's called?
Yeah, so we both went to the famous sort of the ground zero, if you will, for New Southern cuisine, and that's called Husk.
Yeah. This is from the restaurateur Sean Brock, who's been in the news and controversial. And who famously has sort of found himself and reformed, and there were allegations of sexual harassment and too much drinking and things behind the scenes at Husk. But what he's acknowledged for in food communities is that he's obsessed with reviving local ingredients. He goes to great lengths to preserve beans and varieties of corn that used to be grown in the South that have been nearly lost. So, there's like scenes of him like this Indiana Jones going into old grandmother's attics and finding old seed pods and growing them and then serving them at Husk. So it's a real foodie's place.
Yeah, and like Mexico City, they've done this really cool thing where they've turned all these old mansions into restaurants.
Yes.
So even if you can't tour that many mansions, you can eat in a lot of them. And Husk, I think, has done this remarkably well. I mean, it is a incredible. The renovation, it's gorgeous. We ate in the patio, but they've actually taken two different houses. One they've turned into sort of a bar, and one they've turned, one is a main restaurant. And then in between the two houses, it's this fantastic outdoor space. So it is quite an operation there at Husk. And I think probably still to this day, even though it's been open now for 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
The hardest table to get in town.
Yeah, definitely a reservation place.
Yeah.
And as are most of the ones that we're going to cover further out, because especially in high tourism season, food is one of the primary attractions of Charleston. So full recommendation, do your research before you go. Hopefully this podcast is part of that. And immediately seek reservations. And if I'm not mistaken, Ryan, back in the archives, I think we have another episode that's all about secret tips for getting restaurant recommendations. I'll link to that in the show notes because you could definitely apply some of those tactics to these restaurants.
Yeah, I most definitely use some of those tactics to get reservations here.
It's just hard to be charming behind the mask,
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
You can't flash that smile.
So, right next to Husk is another restaurant that is a little more low key, called Poogan's Porch. And, you have a connection to this now because Poogan's Porch, we had brunch there, really fun place. They have two porches that you can sit outside. We sat upstairs, the upstairs porch. But there's
is that what they call it? That's good.
Yeah.
The upstairs porch.
The upstairs porch. So we had a great brunch there. But the story goes that when the owners, renovated this and they opened this up, many years ago, there was a little dog that was, there and was on the porch when the workers were doing all the renovations, and they would joke that this restaurant didn't belong to the owner; it belonged to Poogan, this dog that had been left behind. Mm-hmm. So when the restaurant opened, they named the restaurant after the dog, and for several years until the dog passed away, he was sort of the mascot. And so when you go to the restaurant, you see some pictures and stuff of this dog, but because it's Charleston and it's the South, the dog remains with us to this day, and
in spirit.
And there are many ghost sightings of Poogan, and people who have had while they've been enjoying their meals on one of the porches have had a ghost dog beg them for food, and the waitresses even tell kids if they want to feed Poogan to put their French fries on the ground, and they would call the ghost dog over. So not to, the good capitalists that these restaurant owners are, they decided to actually sell stuffed versions of Poogan to guests. And I got you a little baby Charlie a Poogan.
It was a great gift. He loves Poogan. I've sent you a video of him cuddling with Poogan, and a very cute little stuffed animal dog. And I will say, Ryan, this fits the 3 Ps of the souvenir. Absolutely. So if you could just take us through the Ps, I think that actually, I don't know the price. Maybe you spent, $100 on this stuff.
No. It was the
reasonable.
price. It was reasonable enough.
All right.
Yeah. So price, portability, and potency.
Potency. No. Look at you. Yeah. To me, I love this story of the ghost dog. Highly potent. And while Charlie's still a little young to understand that he's holding the ghost of a dead dog, I do look forward to helping him understand it in the future. And I love this idea of telling kids to serve the ghost dog.
Yeah. Well, this could also make like a good new Annabelle type horror movie, right? Where you buy a ghost dog and then the ghost sort of travels with you. I was thinking about this.
What's Annabelle?
Annabelle is like a haunted doll that like you creepy looking that some kid got for Halloween one year, and it came back to haunt them.
Well,
So,
I mean, this is the Southern Gothic spirit of the city coming alive.
And because this is Charleston, there of course are other ghosts that haunt Poogan's Porch, including this old woman that used to live there before it became a restaurant. So you might see Poogan, you might see you might see another spirit, but we didn't see either. It was a bright sunny day, and I guess Poogan had other plans for himself.
And not far from Poogan's Porch and Husk is another restaurant that I would mention called The Ordinary. And Ryan, it's actually quite extraordinary, which I guess is probably what they were going for. It's an ironic name for it. And Ryan, did you end up eating here?
No, I didn't, but it was definitely on our list and got recommended by quite a few folks.
Yeah, this is one that I can imagine, unlike Husk, which has the beautiful outdoor area and the big porches, the Ordinary was actually built into an old antique bank. So it's a 1927 building of limestone and brick, and it's one of these gorgeous old stately buildings. If I pointed it to you and said, "What do you think that was?" you'd probably say, "I think it's a grand old bank." And it has been preserved and recreated as a wonderful seafood restaurant. And Ryan, I imagine you would also recommend sticking to seafood while you're in South Carolina is a great recommendation because it's as fresh as it could possibly be, and The Ordinary is a finer dining facility where I would really recommend, particularly enjoying the oysters. But sitting outside, you wouldn't really get the full experience. What you really want to see is what they've done to the interior because of how gorgeous and large it is. So it has a soaring 23 feet high ceiling. And one of the little details that I love is that when the architects were rethinking this old bank and how to make it into a restaurant, they really didn't know what to do with the giant vault that sat right in the middle of it, and they considered making it a private dining a private dining room within the broader restaurant, but then decided that wasn't really in the spirit of what they were trying to create. So what they did was they just took the enormous door off and used it as decoration behind the raw bar. So a really fun evocation of what the building used to be for and keeping it alive and spirited today.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in Charleston, which is awesome. And I look forward to going back, after I get the vaccine and being able to check out some of the places that were more indoor focused, because that was definitely on my list.
Yeah, well, and if you really want to take a look for a little Easter egg in the restaurant, the steel that from the old vault was reused to make the bar along the southern wall. And if you look closely, there are initials etched into that steel, and they surmise that these were from the workers who originally built the place, who are putting their little initials in to claim. So a lot of fun old history, Easter eggs, if you're into that sort of thing, which of course we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to give one more shout out to a restaurant because, I don't want this to become just a list of restaurants that we enjoyed. Sure. But I think I have to say the best meal that I had my entire time in Charleston was at this place that opened up in 2011. And it's called The Grocery. And it's run by this chef named Kevin Johnson, who since he's opened the restaurant has gotten multiple James Beard nominations. And, just super farm to table, fish to table, really fresh food. Again, using the new Southern style that came out of Charleston. And, when we walked up to the restaurant, we just saw a couple tables out front, and then, inside it was lovely, but we were like, okay, this is, they don't really have any good outdoor seating. But then the host actually took us behind the restaurant where they had this old parking lot that they had turned into they had put up a tent, and they had like 20 tables outside under a tent. And it was this like sort of vibrant, exciting outdoor dinner experience that, New York, we don't have the room for such things. So it was cool to see. And the food was fantastic.
Did you get the pickles?
Oh, I got the pickles.
Yeah, they have fantastic pickles. We also ate at the grocery. And I remember if I could have, I would have just had a whole pickle meal.
Yeah, I think the grocery, I had eaten at Husk in Nashville, so I know their menu. I love it.
Husk had an outpost in Nashville.
Yeah, they do.
The original is in Charleston.
Yes. That's why I had to go. But yeah, the grocery was definitely we sort of stumbled upon it, and fantastic meal.
So Ryan, Charleston is definitely a city that has so much rich history and things to visit. We're going to call this part 1. This is Charleston part 1. Look for part 2. I suggest we put it out in January so that as the pandemic starts to wind down, people can re-embrace tourism in the spring and head to Charleston.
I think that sounds good.
Well, you know what that means. It's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
Hi, Ryan. We are here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show. It's the final segment of the show. It is synonyms, last and final. And it's your favorite segment of the show. It's my favorite segment of the show. It's popularly known as the people segment. And it's where you and I each take a moment. Oh, God knows in these difficult times, we each need to find a center to ourselves. And this is the moment in the podcast where we do that. And we each share one thing, just one thing. If you bring in multiple things, that's too many things for the last stop. The last stop has a one thing rule. And it's a thing that you and I experienced. Maybe it's something that we shopped for. Maybe it's something that we read. Maybe it's something that we watched. So anything that fed the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So now, Ryan, I have a question for you. And the question, I feel like you probably know the question. We've done it 88 times at this point. But, your ability to forget never surprises me.
I have a boyfriend, Kiernan, so no, I pass.
Do you have a last stop?
I do have a last stop, Kiernan. You might remember earlier in the year, before the pandemic hit, I was thinking about doing a big trip to Tokyo, to Japan.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I said that I was reading a lot of Murakami, and I was inspired to not just see Tokyo, but to travel around and see the everything that Japan has to offer. And it just so happens that in Tokyo right now, they are constructing a new library in honor of Murakami at the university he went to, Waseda University. And it's going to house his entire personal archives, as well as apparently tens of thousands of vinyl records that he has collected. But it's not going to be like a quiet library. He wants it to be like a bustling cultural center. So a lot of, events and when the world returns, lots of events and things. So it looks like it's going to be a huge, open, airy library named after Murakami, coming to Tokyo sometime in 2021. So hopefully that will align with my eventual visit.
We love cool libraries.
I love cool libraries. Floating books, like in Mexico City.
The floating bookcases in Mexico City. I think you sent me there. One of the best things that we checked out.
It's very cool.
One of the best things about libraries, the price is right to get in most of the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You just go in.
So looking forward to that. So that is my last stop.
That's a great one.
Yeah, it's a traditional last stop,
It is. It's a very traditional last stop. I am not the biggest Murakami fan, but I would absolutely go and visit the library.
Yeah. Too much imagination for you, Just
please. It's weird for the sake of weird, in my opinion, which I'm not into. But for what it's worth, I've been to Tokyo one time. This gives me a great reason to go back.
Reason to go back. Kiernan, do you have a last stop this week?
I do indeed have a last stop this week, and it's Ryan related. As Ryan mentioned during our Charleston discussion, he gave my son Charlie a doll, a stuffed animal, I'd say.
Stuffed animal, yeah.
Stuffed animal of Poogan that you had hauled all the way from Charleston and you hand delivered here. Now, I want to be clear.
We let it sit for 3 or 4 days, right?
and we put it under ultraviolet lights. No, but joking aside, you had been planning to come up. I was really hoping that we could have you, but I had to say, you know what, you got to go stay at an Airbnb. We can't take the risk. We saw each other outside. For a walk.
And masks.
And I most of the time 6 feet apart, which my preference is actually to have Ryan much further away than 6 feet. So Ryan, you came and I said, come and meet us in front of the house. We'll load the boy into the stroller. Catherine will come and we'll go take an interesting walk around Somerville. And so where we decided to go was to the campus of Tufts University.
Yes, Tufts University.
And Ryan, you have a very clever joke about Tufts University that I think you probably want to share.
Oh, so Tufts University, it's up on that big hill.
Yes, it's up on a hill in Somerville. Yes,
and that's the only time that Tufts students can look down on Harvard.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it is very funny.
I'm sure our
as Harvard men ourselves, we find that to be very funny.
Well, you've walked near Harvard. That's true. So we went to Tufts University. Tufts is a historic school. It was founded in 1852, and it's a quite beautiful campus. And for anyone that's familiar with Harvard Yard, you do see a great resemblance between the two. It's kind of a classic red brick. But as you mentioned, they are elevated quite high up. So it's a nice steep walk. You really get your heart pumping. And what is most notable, in my opinion, is the famous Tufts mascot, whose name is Jumbo and who is an elephant. And the story of... Do
you think Jumbo and Dumbo are connected at all? Because Dumbo is also an elephant.
Yeah, and Dumbo is a weird... First of all, thank you for letting me know that. And secondly, Dumbo is a strange name. I don't know. We can do recalculating. Everybody, edge of your seat. Are Jumbo and Dumbo related?
The elephants, yeah.
Now, Ryan, they know they're elephants. Okay, they know they're elephants. Everybody knows Dumbo's an elephant. Okay, so Tufts University has this mascot, Jumbo, who's, if you've ever seen Tufts gear, it's like a vicious elephant. And when at the university, one of the landmark things that you visit when you're walking in the core part of the campus is this life-size elephant statue. And this is, in fact, a recreation of the original Jumbo. Now, who is the original Jumbo? The original Jumbo came from the Barnum Circus, like P.T. Barnum. And P.T. Barnum was one of the earliest benefactors of Tufts College and actually founded a natural history museum there. And you can still see the sign for the museum. It's now a classroom building, but it used to be the museum. And in that museum, there was a famous stuffed elephant named Jumbo. And very sadly, there was a tragic fire that reduced the Natural History Museum, its whole collection, including the original Jumbo, to ashes. And amazingly, Tufts does still have in its archives the preserved tail of Jumbo the elephant. And I plan one day on making an appointment and really getting up there post-pandemic. I discovered this fact during pandemic. And I've just been champing at the bit to get up there and maybe even hold the desiccated tail in my hand. But
I don't think they let you touch the tail, do they?
I will report back. I think if I wear some special gloves, I bet they will.
Well, you're going to have to be wearing gloves anyway.
I'm a bit of a travel influencer here. Get
true.
Tourists up to top. And so once they lost the original stuffed Jumbo, they made this statue that you can visit and you can pay your honor to Jumbo. And then just around the corner from the statue, there is a lovely garden patio area. And it has one of the absolute best views looking back from Somerville, from this high hill back onto Boston. So you get the full Boston skyline, the Prudential Center. And that's where Ryan and I and my boy and my wife went and took a walk. And it was a lovely quarantine activity. It would have been nice in probably warmer weather. But Tufts University, well worth a visit if you're in the Boston area.
And plenty of other elephants that are not torched.
No, that's true. I've actually been thinking of creating this, what I call the Tufts Safari. And this is a walking tour around the Tufts campus to spot all the little hidden elephants. Because as you point out, I know there's a fountain in this little closed off garden that has an elephant head on it. And then there's another classroom building that has what looks like a mounted elephant head. It's metal, but it's a mounted elephant head that sort of greets you, that you have to pass under. And I like to think pay your respects to Jumbo.
I think a mounted elephant head, that sort of scares young Republicans away, right? It's like it's a mounted head.
Well, that's their future. But who wants them on campus? Anyway, now Ryan. It's almost Christmas time, which means it is nearly time for our yearly tradition of the Christmas Spectacular. This will be our third annual Christmas Spectacular, where we take a step away from travel, which in the pandemic, that's a welcome break as we try to fill these travel episodes. And we talk about holiday cheer, holiday songs, holiday movies. And we're gonna have a great time, raise some eggnog, give each other a gift. Every year we have the ugly ornament competition where you and I each exchange an ugly ornament with each other.
I have a really good one this year.
I'm still on the search. So anyone who wants to send it directly to me, KiernanPSchmidt@gmail.com.
Oh, no.
You can't put it on out of office because Ryan monitors that email very closely. So Ryan, we will be dropping that on, I think Christmas Eve day seems like the perfect time. It's a special
so families
episode.
can get together. No, not virtually get together.
Yes, virtually get together
and listen to it
Skype.
together. Yeah.
Exactly. It's going to be lovely. I think we're going to talk about Dolly Parton's Christmas special, which I know you have strong feelings about.
Yes. We're
Don't-
going to talk about. It's going to be full of Christmas cheer.
Oh, yeah,
the episode. Yeah.
The episode's going to be full of Christmas cheer. And then after that, we're going to have our year in review. So we got 2 very special episodes that the fans look forward to all year long. We look forward to all year long. We work on them all year long. The Christmas Spectacular, the year in review.
And then our countdown to 100 episodes, which we don't want to let people. 2021 is going to be this countdown to 100. It's going to be very, very, very exciting.
We're working hard.
Yeah,
and some surprises.
All the guests we've been talking about for these last 90 episodes.
All the episodes with Rick Steves in the title. maybe episode 100.
No evidence is going to happen yet, but maybe.
No. But I'm pursuing it. I am pursuing it. The quest for Rick Steves continues.
Yeah. If you know Rick Steves, folks, now's the time to say this. This is the time to be on Out of Office.
This is why we have the email outofofficepod@gmail.com. If you know Rick Steves, or if you are Rick Steves.
Yeah. Or Rick, just respond to any of Kiernan's text. I know that he sent you plenty of text and
the pictures I send. I mean, it's a lot. I try to demonstrate my love. All right, Ryan. Well, until then,
I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
The seat taken.
Did you name Charles after Charleston?
Oh, brother. No, obviously it's after Prince Charles, the most majestic of the royals.
It's going to be fun to introduce little Charlie to Charleston. To be like, this is your namesake. This will all be yours one day.
Sure.